a short time ago, the DNI Tulsi Gabbard outlining claims of an alleged conspiracy by top Obama administration officials to manufacture the idea that Russia interfered in the 2016 presidential election, which is something that is just true and long held, that Russia did interfere in the 2016 presidential election.
Republicans and Democrats said so quite publicly at the time. Well, yesterday, President Trump said former President Obama was guilty, quote, of treasonous behavior. Today, DNI Gabbard did not go that far.
When you look at the intent behind creating a fake manufactured intelligence document that directly contradicts multiple assessments that were created by the intelligence community, the expressed intent and what followed afterward can only be described as a years-long coup and a treasonous conspiracy against the American people, our republic, and an attempt to undermine President Trump's administration.
Today, she said she was referring that question now to the Justice Department to decide if there was evidence of that. Seeing as Jeff Zeleny is at the White House. So, Jeff, where does this go from here? And shall we expect the Justice Department to seriously consider criminal charges?
Well, look, it's difficult to rule anything out given the fact that here we are today near the end of July of 2025 talking about this intelligence report back from 2016. This is the latest example of this White House trying to deflect and distract from the questions that are that remain unanswered and are quite frustrating to many of the president's own supporters about the Jeffrey Epstein matter. But today at the White House briefing, the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, right there, was talking about this report about the 2016 intelligence suggesting that Russia favored Donald Trump to win that election. But she misstated a couple of things in terms of one, simply she said that the variety of reports disagreed with this, but you'll remember the Republican report from the Senate, which Marco Rubio, then of course a Florida Republican senator, now the Secretary of State and one of the president's top advisors, he also concluded with that assessment at the time. So it was hardly a one-sided assessment. So what is happening now, the bottom line to all of this, is the president yesterday decided to suddenly try and change the subject after unsuccessfully trying to do so for several days, and that's where we are left here. So it's uncertain if the Attorney General will actually investigate if the former president, Barack Obama, was guilty of a treasonous behavior. The spokesperson for the former president yesterday called this bizarre and ridiculous. They normally don't comment on things that the Trump administration is saying or doing, but they said this was one example of where they thought they had to say that it simply is bizarre and ridiculous in their words. So look, the bottom line to all of this is the Justice Department certainly has enough on their plate with the questions about Jeffrey Epstein. It's unclear if they will also go ahead and investigate this. Never mind the fact that the statute of limitations also may have run, given that it's almost 1 decade since then.
Yeah, Jeff Zeleny, thank you so much. I want to bring in CNN senior law enforcement analyst and former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe. We should also note, Andy, that the president was asked about Jeffrey Epstein the other day, and this is the direction he went. He immediately tried to talk about, the Russia hoax, as he calls it, Hillary Clinton. He's clearly trying to distract from the Epstein issue, which continues to dog him. We know that. So with that in mind, just taking a look at this, because it is important as he pushes and his administration pushes these kinds of things, to take a look at what Gabbard is saying here.
It's really, Brianna, it's really hard to try to sort through the confusion that seems to be surrounding the DNI's comments. But I will say my opinion at this point is what the DNI has conflated are two separate conclusions about levels of about lines of investigation that were happening at the same time. So to put it simply, we were deeply concerned about what the Russians were doing to target our election in 2016. And ultimately what we concluded is they did a lot of different things. And don't take my opinion for it. The Mueller report is sitting right there on the shelf behind me. You can get your own. It's about 400 pages. It begins with the conclusion that the Russians, in a sweeping and systematic fashion, interfered with the election. Some of the ways they did that was by sending undercovers here to the United States to travel around the country and find out what people thought. They established the Internet Research Agency to create fake accounts on social media platforms and to try to influence Americans' sentiment about the election in that way. They performed a hack and dump campaign in which they targeted political institutions with their cyber operators, and they stole information from places like the DNC. They attempted to do it in the RNC as well. So a lot of different lines of effort. One of them was they actually targeted the state electoral infrastructure. So many states were the victims of malicious Russian cyber activity. They tried to sneak their way into these state electoral systems to understand what was going on. In a few states, they got into voter registration rolls, which was very concerning. But what they didn't get into were any of the machines that are necessary to change the results of the election. And here comes the confusion. So on that line of inquiry, there was a pretty clear consensus across the intelligence community that the Russians had not succeeded in trying to change the results of the election. That did not change our conclusion that they did many other things to influence the outcome of the election. So she is trying to say that because we concluded they didn't actually have an impact on the vote tally, that is somehow contradicting our overall conclusion that they made several efforts to try to impact the election.
I mean,
that's as near as I can go to figure out what she's talking about.
Andy, there were layers to this assessment at the time. First layer was Russia interfered in the election. No one contested that at the time or even today, and Tulsi Gabbard said that again. Yes, Russia meddled in the election. At the top level was the possibility that they might have attempted to interfere with voting systems, which the intelligence assessments at the time never said that, never said there was evidence of that. But there was this middle thread, right, that was Russia interfering to benefit Donald Trump. And as I remember, that assessment was based on a couple of things. One, human intelligence inside the Kremlin. And I know that House Intelligence Committee members at the time took issue with that, saying that was not conclusive enough, and it was never at the confidence level that the other findings were. But there were other elements that led to that assessment, one of which was they stole DNC materials, emails, Hillary Clinton, Podesta, et cetera, and then released them at times that would benefit Donald Trump during the election campaign. One of those times was at the release of the Access Hollywood tape, right? Is that now? Intelligence assessments, as you know better than me, are such that they rarely say, we know this 100%, but they use that as one piece of evidence to come to that conclusion that the preference was for Trump. Do I have that right?
Yeah, that's a great summary. So basically, you're talking about the intelligence community assessment, which was the piece that was essentially requested by the president after the election. And it came to three conclusions. The first was, yes, they absolutely tried to sow chaos and undermine Americans' confidence in the election. That's number one. Number two, they definitely wanted to hurt Hillary Clinton's chances of getting elected. And the third conclusion was they affirmatively wanted to help Donald Trump's chances of winning the election. Pretty much the first two, no one has argued about. The third one seems to be the one that still causes pain for Republicans on the Hill and the DNI. But nevertheless, it is an intelligence assessment. If you dig into the sourcing, you could decide you have a different opinion. That doesn't mean that the original opinion was invalid or treasonous, just means that was the opinion of the community at that time. I concur with that opinion. In my view, they had good reason to base that on. Almost everyone who has reviewed our work has come to that same conclusion. You know, the Senate Intelligence Committee report, which you noted, the Mueller investigation, it's been 2 years investigating it, came to the same conclusions, general conclusions. John Durham, who came back and investigated everything we do and brought no problems or complaints based upon that review. The House Intelligence Committee report, which has now been declassified, agrees in large part with what we determined, but of course differs on that count. So the idea that she would use this discussion around sourcing and intents of Russians as some sort of springboard for charges against Barack Obama or John Brennan or Jim Comey or anyone else is absurd. And she either knows it's absurd and she's doing it anyway, or the director of national intelligence actually doesn't understand the nuances of intelligence, which should concern a lot of Americans.